What is something that everyone accepts as normal that scares you? Story 1. That being in debt is normal. So many people just keep digging that hole with some amorphous thought that they will pay it all back eventually, even if they know deep down that it just won't happen. The whole system of credit/credit scores makes my blood boil. It's virtually impossible to exist without a credit score, which you can't get if you don't go into debt. I lived completely debt-free until I was 24. No credit cards, no student loans, worked full-time in college, and finally caved when I couldn't get an apartment on my own because of my lack of a credit score that showed I had no fiscal responsibility. Just because you have credit cards doesn't mean you have to go into debt. I have really good credit, like 60K in credit, and I don't owe a penny on them, and I've never paid a penny of interest. There's literally nothing keeping people from treating credit cards like debit cards. Lots of people are car, house, and credit card poor. They have decent jobs but just spend beyond their means. I'm way more sympathetic to people who bust their balls at low-paying jobs and go into debt than people who have every financial means to make it work and still go into the red. I've seen my coworkers do some of the stupidest crap like finance their dream vacation on a 25% APR card or roll 2 years of negative equity and depreciation on a 6-year loan into a new, even bigger one. I don't want to come off as rude, and I agree it's a problem, but it seems to be more of an American thing. From what I noticed, at least in Central and Eastern Europe, it's not that common to go into debt besides getting loans for apartments or houses, and that's if you want to buy one. From what I noticed in America, it's more common to get a loan for, say, a car, or go on a holiday, or to buy a phone. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems a lot of Americans don't use debit cards for some reason. In Western Europe, the Netherlands, credit cards aren't really the norm either. The most common reason to get one is probably to travel or to pay for foreign stuff. It is mostly an American thing, or at least America is an extreme example. The population is being pushed to endanger themselves financially for the sake of bankers' profits, and it's probably the already poor who end up losing the most. Yeah, I don't understand credit cards at all. For a conference that got canceled due to COVID, the organizers wanted to refund via credit card. I don't have one. Oh, okay. Then it's 6 weeks for a bank transfer. WTF? Just let me send a goddamn ticky or something, and I have no clue why. Europeans order from all over the world and there's never a problem with paying, just via your bank or maybe with PayPal. Although I guess PayPal is cheating since it's basically a virtual credit card or something. It's basically a way to float your expenses and, as other people have said, avoid responsibility for fraud. There are also reward systems. My primary credit card is paid in full every month and does not accrue interest. In exchange for a yearly fee, I get roadside assistance, the best customer service I've ever experienced, credits and promotions on certain transactions, and points that you can use for basically anything. I fly internationally about once a year for free because of the card, and I receive 10% of the membership fee back just this month for making my regular purchases. If you use it right and don't overspend, credit cards can be a wonderful tool. Story 2. It feels like these are not normal times, and it scares me what peak crazy might be. Get into learning history. These times are the safest and most prosperous times in human history. The only thing is that now you have a device on your person at all times that shows you the worst of the world 24/7. They definitely aren't status quo times, but they're not species-defining either. The World War II era alone is a crazier time as a whole, considering how much of the world was involved. I would agree with you completely if it was 2019, to be honest. I think we have earned a bit of legit misery in 2020. I get that it's not as bad as World War II, but to be fair, a few times in history, if any, were as bad as the World Wars. My family was one of the few in my small town to not panic buy canned food and toilet paper at the start of the pandemic. We didn't run out of anything when the stores were empty, but now I still have this fear of running out of basic supplies. I have to talk myself out of buying a ton of stuff at the grocery store to hoard because I'm scared that things will get worse, and we won't have what we need this time. My youngest son is 2, and I get so scared about him not having diapers or whole milk. Listened to a podcast where they touched on the breaking down of international trust, Russia annexing Crimea, and a hit within the UK, the US pulling out of WHO, and the Iran deal, and threatening other treaties. The UK and Brexit, China, and I guess everything about them. It feels like we're on the cusp of something big, and everything that happens feels like a sharp inhale. Is this it? Is this the breaking point? Well, the whole peaceful world and being nice to each other is very new in human history, partly caused by the realization that we have the weapons to make whole continents uninhabitable. So we should expect it to be challenged, but I feel like it is still very welcome and wanted by most people. It also feels like one of the best ideas we ever had to me. Story 3. When all those kids in Pinocchio turned into donkeys. To soothe myself, I have said that when they wish upon a star for a chance to be good boys again, the blue fairy or one of her sisters shows up, scolds them, then brings them back to their homes as talking donkeys. From there, they earn their way back to becoming boys by doing good deeds. If I'm wrong, no one corrects me. I had to do this for a friend when I took him to see Titanic. He was really upset and horrified that she threw the necklace they had all been looking for into the ocean. He lived in a country where they didn't have TV or watched movies. It was one of the first times he had been in a movie theater. I told him that it had become caught on the submarine they used to go down to the wreck, and that they found the necklace when they brought it up to do repairs. We had a pop-up book when I was younger. I don't know if it was the Disney Pinocchio, but it might have been the Disney characters with an adapted story. Anyway, it was pretty much the same as the movie except for a very explicit part where Pinocchio as a donkey was about to be sold to a man who was going to use his hide as a drum. Yes, the book said very clearly that he was going to kill Pinocchio, skin him, and use it as a drum. Story 4. Major news outlets deliberately leave out information, select misleading headlines, or have strong political biases or agendas. I once worked for a phone company. It had bad labor relations, indifferent customer service, poor environmental record, and broke the law a dozen times a day just because no one could be bothered to read up on what the law was. All good reasons to criticize the company, but when a major national newspaper did criticize them, they ignored all that and made something up. Guess they didn't have time for research. To add to this, many people tend to be skeptical of media they already disagree with, but accept the opinions of media they agree with without question. If your opinions swing left, you probably know that Fox News is full of crap, but many wouldn't also say the same about CNN. The opposite applies to the right. The problem with the media in general these days is about eliciting an emotional reaction to get and keep you watching. Informing you so that you can form your own opinions comes a very distant second. Ask yourself whenever you consume news media, is this trying to make me angry or sad, etc.? Just the photos they choose shouldn't be allowed. I mean, you can capture 5 seconds of video from a person or less, grab the stills from it, and the idea of your story could be framed in a dozen different ways, just from mere changes in how the person contorted his or her face in those brief moments. And we know the media does it. We see it daily. And yet it never really seems to creep into public discussion about just how bad that is for all of us. It's amazing how many times we read a story and go to see the actual video of what was said, happened on YouTube, and it's just not right at all. Like, didn't the reporter watch the video or realize the people they didn't dupe will now lose faith and trust in everything they say? It's so obnoxious. I know YouTube can be crappy to creators, but I'm really glad it is there to show all of the BS and lies. We watched 2020 and Nightline as a family when I was young, and we just never even thought to question the validity and agenda of the anchor. Now you can't help going, do they think I'm dumb or blind? Story 5. The rapid increase in mass surveillance combined with the gathering and use of biometric data. I'm not usually a doomsday conspiracy theorist, but sprinkle a little advanced AI on top of that and I'll go make myself a nice tinfoil hat. Watching our rights slowly get taken away and people consider it normal is definitely one of my great terrors. Like privacy. I mean, less than half a century ago, people would have considered it a conspiracy theory to say that companies know everything about you, your location and crap, and they sell your data all around. On that note, there's a book called The Circle that is basically like a modern version of 1984. It's terrifying, and the reason so is because I could actually see it happening. People are blind to apps dressing up signing over privacy in cutesy disguises. Snapchat Maps, for example, normalized tracking you and your friends, and people just rolled over and took it. Face change apps collecting your info for troll/bot farms also became normal, even though there were constant articles about not just giving your photos over to weird apps that appear out of nowhere. A few weeks back, I saw a deepfake app doing the rounds, where it would deepfake you into footage. And honestly, you have to be a big-time dumbass to do that and not see why that info is being harvested. Imagine this kind of thing happening without smartphones. It is equivalent to a Google employee following you around all day with a notepad writing down everything you do, where you go, what you buy, and even timing how long you look at things. He would be sitting next to you in your living room taking notes of what movies you watch and music you listen to. He would even sit next to your bed with a stopwatch timing how long you sleep for. He then would take all that info and make a bunch of money selling it. And what do you get in return? Adverts and crappy apps that are designed to eat as much of your time as possible. I know someone who works for a private security company that mainly does camera surveillance. They have facial recognition software that processes the footage. Not only does it simply confirm yes, this is a human, but it can also store and track your information. So if you work somewhere that uses such cameras and are in there after hours, for example, it will recognize you and not flag it. If you go on a crime spree, they will be able to identify everywhere you have been that their cameras have picked up your face. It really concerns me how quickly and willingly people are willing to give up their information and rights, especially in the current times in which governments are pushing increasingly invasive and authoritarian laws under the guise of trying to control COVID-19, and people are sadly lapping it up. The fact is, the government and police forces will do anything they can to hold on to and gain more of an upper hand on its populace. So even when this pandemic is over, they'll keep pushing the fear in order to keep the ball rolling. After all, they can't let a good crisis go to waste. Story 6. There are creatures in the ocean that we haven't discovered yet, just chillin' down there. Have you ever considered that a few animals will never know about the existence of other living beings? Like a lion wouldn't know about, say, an octopus or a whale? That is something that I absolutely love about our world. We have lived for multiple thousand years and still so much stuff is unclear and not found. At the same time, it terrifies me really, knowing that some weird predator could live down there just waiting for someone to come. But it could also be that the most beautiful creature chills down there and waits for his time to shine. That's one reason I like the sky more than the ocean. It's clear and you know what you have to face. But with the ocean, anything could happen to you without us even understanding it. Up until a few years ago, the only way we knew such a thing as a giant squid existed outside of myth and legend is because dead ones washed up on shore every once in a great while. And we're super dumb about how we go about looking for them. We go thousands of feet underwater where there's almost no light and we shine gigantic flashlights everywhere to see what's around. Unsurprisingly, everything worth looking at swims the hell away from the gigantic, painful ball of light in their habitat. As we develop better and better low-light camera sensors, I expect to see more new animal species discovered in the deeps, because we won't scare them away so much just with our presence. The way some people feel about space, I feel about the ideal. Granted, it's not as massive, but to be in the ocean is just as amazing. Crazy and amazing life forms that look out of this world and live God knows how. Other life forms could be studied in multiple ways to help our daily lives. Who knows what else? And at this point in time, way more explorable. If we really wanted to, and funded it enough to do so, I don't think there's any part we couldn't fully explore. Story 7. How acceptable it is for companies to screw people. Damn, I guess I hit a nerve. It was a rude awakening for me when I realized HR in a company is to protect the company and not the other way around. Even shocking how some companies deal with the ombudsman. I worked for a large company for 4 years, and about 10 months after graduating, they decided to close the entire division I worked for, which was nationwide. Labor laws are that severance isn't required until 5 years. They would not budge on giving me anything until our local office manager tore the HR person responsible for firing everyone a new one over the phone. HR was such a cold group of people to deal with, and they didn't give a damn about you on a personal level. The local office manager was great though, a quiet, extremely polite lady who had everyone's respect. Apparently, it was a very heated argument over my severance. My grandma was working at her job for 32 years. Excellent employee. They furloughed her a few months back and called her yesterday to tell her that she would no longer be working for them. 32 years gone just like that without a thought. These companies don't give a damn about you, and you should never assume that they do. An oil drilling company had a contract with my uncle's farm years ago to drill for oil, and the company never paid my uncle, and the drilling caused all of the 500 cows to get poisoned and die. They never got compensation, and they had to convert the farm type from dairy to beef. They tried to take the oil company to court, but they were screwed over because the judge didn't want to help them. I've been thinking about capitalism a bit recently and realized how messed up it is, and how brainwashed we all are. When a company pulls crappy tactics to make a few extra bucks, everyone just sort of shrugs their shoulders and accepts that it's their prerogative to do anything and everything they can for profit. We may complain a little, but nothing will ever be done about it, as it directly benefits the ones making policy. Capitalism will be the downfall of the Western world. Just an endless cycle of elites gaining power until the bubble bursts, and it all burns to the ground. Rinse and repeat. Story 8. That you should have a career or future planned out for yourself before you finish high school. Why do people do this? As if people don't change as they grow, and that your ambition stays the same? Do you expect teens to decide what they're going to do with their lives before they can even drive? I've always hated that fact. At the beginning of grade 12, 18 years old, I was too young and a child. Can't decide most things for myself. But the moment I finish school, I suddenly have to already have a 5-year plan, with multiple interests in universities, jobs, etc. In my country, you have to decide at grade 9, 14 years old, since you need to choose a study area for high school, science, humanities, art, or professional degrees, which influences which universities you can apply to. Or you start working at 18 if you chose a professional degree. Yep, I think too much emphasis is placed on getting right into college. College is important for sure, but I think to get the greatest benefit from it, you should have a good idea of what you want to do first. There's nothing wrong with taking a few years off to work and deciding what you really want to do. True, too many teens go to college or university because of peer pressure, and some even go just to please their parents and relatives, neglecting their own needs and opinions. I am 17 and experiencing this firsthand. Peer pressure is demoralizing. If you don't go to uni or college, you are viewed as a failure and looked down on. Can't speak for the US, if that's where you live, but that's how it is in Greece. The pressure on our final year in school is almost frightening, and everyone says that if we don't enter a college or uni, we have no future. What is this crap? I think the expectation is that you should pick something, but it's not going to be a career you're forced to do forever. There should be more discussion and emphasis that your career path can and will change from the expectations that you originally had. You are not forced to study geology forever just because that's the major you signed up for freshman year of college. You're allowed to change majors to political science because you took an intro class and loved it. You're allowed to drop out and join the Peace Corps because that's where you find meaning in life, but you have to pick something to start your career path no matter how winding it might end up being. If you are waffling and settling for a retail job to figure things out without going to college, signing up for trade classes, doing volunteer experiences, or anything else, you might never have the experiences that help shape what you want to do with your life. You can't know what you like or don't like without doing it, and you can't have those experiences without picking a potential career path and trying it out, while always knowing you're allowed to change your mind. Story 9. Having to work more than one job to survive. Having to work to survive in general. We throw away 50% of food. There are more empty houses than homeless people, and there's plenty of water out there. We can let people survive without needing to work all the time but still having luxury items as an incentive, but we just don't. Just moved from Los Angeles, and it's a huge weight that has been lifted off of my shoulders. It's weird how they've made the phrase side hustle into something cool, like you're not artsy and motivated and cool if you're not spending your extra free hours working on something to sell at a stupidly high price, calling it couture, all so that you can make rent and pay for that $15 drink on a rooftop somewhere. I miss a few things from there, but not that much actually. I wouldn't say it's normal. My best friend from college has to work 3 jobs. He has for 20 years. We still talk every month or so, sometimes more, sometimes less. He constantly complains about life and his struggles. I mostly just listen. give him advice and applaud his tenacity and his will to survive and keep on going. I believe there are a lot of people in this situation, but it's not normal. Depends on location, job, and spending habits, but is in line with another poster's reference to debt. You could afford a $75,000 house on $34,000 a year, either 15 or 30 years. Both still cost less than rent per month, and be fairly comfortable with food or entertainment if you spend half the second job's time getting to know which stores to buy which products at. Wife and I go to 4 different stores for meat, produce, dairy, and starches. Each has at least one of those at better prices than the others. Story 10. Alexa. I hustle my dad for being tech backward, but for this reason. I will be my dad in a short number of years. I'm not kidding myself that I'm anything like off-grid, but the idea of having something actually designed to listen to you installed in your house just doesn't sit well with me. One of my favorite memes is something like, in the 70s, I can't say it over the phone, it might be wiretapped. Today, hey wiretap, what's a good recipe for pancakes? And I actually just verbally described a meme. I am my father. The transition is now complete. This is one of those irrational fears because you carry a device with you at all times. Most people basically sleep with it as well. Not only is your cell phone listening, but it's also tracking every single move you make. I always laugh when people say, wow, you actually keep an Alexa in your home? And I'm like, yeah. If you're so scared of people listening in on you, go throw your phone on a busy street, walk away, and move to the mountains. I have both an Echo in the living room next to my dog's kennel and an Echo Dot in my son's room for his school, etc. The one in the living room is probably tired of listening to my dog's toots and The Office on repeat, and the Dot in my son's room gets asked all the questions he would ask me. Plus, we listen to music on both, and I have routines and reminders set on both for him to keep track of what he needs to do so I don't forget. I don't have a very interesting life, and I don't have one in our bedroom or bathroom, so I don't really mind. My phone gets more info from me than they do. I love George Orwell, and I was once that person, but we openly give information through other social media, and we give our locations out all the time. This one cracks me up. Honestly, I have 2 Echo Dots, and I'm very aware that they're listening, but there's not a damn interesting thing to listen to. I'm nearing 40, so I'm in that part of life where I just work and hang out with my family playing video games. In fact, my wife and I intentionally mess with it and talk about buying ridiculous stuff, like toaster cozies, to see if it will offer adverts, which hasn't happened yet. Story 11. The amount of plastic in everyone's homes is in the form of temporary food packaging. It doesn't seem like much until you pay attention to it and then think about how much of it you alone are guilty of discarding. This stuff is literally everywhere, even in the lowest parts of our oceans. Yes, and all the plastic, useless/single-use crap filling the stores all the time. All the poorly made, soon-to-fall-apart crap at the dollar store. Those trinkets every chain store has on hand for the person that's impossible to buy for, or token gifts for people you barely know that they will never use. Who pulls out a tic-tac-toe game set? Or novelty beer glasses? Star Wars Pez dispensers because the only thing you know your step-cousin-in-law likes is Star Wars, and you're on a budget. Millions of new Christmas decorations because consumerism has convinced people your tree can't have the same look every year. Gotta change it up. Why not have 2 Christmas trees? None of that is essential. All of it arrives in the store in plastic packaging and possibly leaves the store in a plastic bag. This world is sick, and it's seen as completely normal. I did a big cleanup of my home over quarantine, and wow, I threw out a lot of plastic. So many times you buy things, and they come in plastic wrap packaging or are made of plastic, only for it to get thrown in the trash. It's just terrible for the environment. Even for snacks. I've bought a bag of Japanese chocolates before, and each piece inside was actually individually wrapped in its own plastic wrapper. I'm talking about 15 pieces of tiny chocolate squares that were wrapped separately. Absolutely unnecessary and wasteful. Story 12. Dying, lingering, painful deaths that last for weeks, months, or even years because we're afraid of death and anti-euthanasia. If other people want to die naturally, that's up to them, and they've got every right to do so. But if I am one day facing a long, painful death, I want to be peacefully and painlessly killed via euthanasia, and I should have the right to do so without risking the doctor performing the procedure going to jail. To be clear, I do not want to die via euthanasia either. The ideal way of going would to be peacefully in my sleep, or alternatively, some kind of instant death via explosion or whatever. I would prefer to die without artificial means to either end, or prolong my life. but euthanasia should be available as an option, not a requirement for those who want it and are facing terminal illness. Euthanasia basically puts you to sleep and then makes your body peacefully shut down. It's also legal in Canada to do such a thing. So many elderly people who are sick of just being unable to move and deemed not suicidal can be granted euthanasia and pass on peacefully, if that brings comfort to anyone in the comments. It does, as possibly looking at an extremely rare brain tumor that gives 7 to 8 months at best. Medical assistance in death has been on my mind lately, and I have been wondering if it was an awful way to go, or if it's just going to sleep. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. Perhaps the story I just posted above will be of help. They are very careful to make sure that you are ready and will leave without a word if you change your mind. You can pass at home or at a friend's or relative's as my aunt did. An IV is set up, and an injection into it puts you gently to sleep. Once there, another slows your heart to a stop, and you are gone to whatever rest you believe in. I sincerely hope you turn out to be looking at something else, but should the time ever come when you are helpless and getting nothing from life but pain, you may be very glad to have set down your wishes and made arrangements earlier. My aunt's eldest son told us she went easily and calmly, and knowing that option is there gives me reassurance that should I be in her place one day, I too can step peacefully into the night. For what it's worth, take care. My aunt had a goodbye party at her brother's place a couple of years ago. Her sons and daughters, her nieces and nephews, her friends from years gone by all gathered, many from hundreds of miles away. Her husband had died many years previously, and she lived with constant weakness and pain and no outlook for improvement. Yet the scene was all very upbeat and people were renewing acquaintances all over the place. She was ensconced in a plush chair in the front room, and people were taking their own few minutes with her in turn. When I sat down by her, she assured me she was going to a better place without pain and told me not to be sad. I was good. I played to her faith and asked her to say hello to my uncle for me. And your mom and dad, she added. I told her I understood why she wanted to go, when she was still well enough to enjoy the wonderful gathering, hugged her, and wished her a happy journey. Then I turned, and the tears came. The next evening, my friend, who had known her well and was at the goodbye, and I were driving along the seashore and noticed a gorgeous sunset forming. We pulled aside and realized it was about the time a nurse, with witness at hand, would put my aunt to sleep one last time. It seemed like a lovely send-off. As hard as it was, I knew she would never lie in pain, unable to speak, in a hospital bed, praying for death to come soon, as others I have known did. That is what I cannot accept as normal. Story 13. Saying no or telling someone I don't want to do something, setting boundaries. Stuff like that is hard to do. I keep thinking of how I'm disappointing the person, hurting their feelings, or making them angry. And the reason it is so hard to do is because everyone has normalized overstepping boundaries. For instance, you start a new job and your coworker asks questions to get to know you, but the questions start to become more and more personal, and you begin to feel more and more uncomfortable. Do you politely refuse to answer these personal questions? If you do, chances are your coworkers will become unfriendly and hostile towards you because you are stuck up or unfriendly. This leads to another extremely frustrating thing that people have normalized: extreme passive aggression. The world is not full of predators anymore. I work at a casino, and back in February, I was asked to stay like half an hour later of my shift, going to overtime late at night. Of course, it's impossible for me to remember how I was on that one specific day, but I could only guess that I was exhausted, not feeling well, or was in pain from standing when I said no. I must have been pestered because I apparently later said yes, then changed my mind and asked to go home at my planned time. Well, August comes and I get my yearly review. Apparently that one moment was such an offensive moment that it completely tarnished my rating for being helpful and a team player, and completely overshadowed the dozens of times I've gone out of my way to be helpful to others, despite it never coming up again until then. And apparently it goes to HR for them to determine my raise. And of course, they're not going to have any context. I like these supervisors, but I'm still considering going back to complain about how it was handled because I consider it absolutely absurd. Story 14. The fact that most of the current generation of working people in this country won't be able to have their own homes. I know a couple that will finally have paid off their home after retirement. It's a real shame, and it's not in America either. This is a worldwide issue for some reason. Europeans and the Japanese have it just as bad. Honestly, it's horrendous in Ireland now, especially in Dublin. For a mortgage for a first-time buyer, you need at least a 10% deposit, but you can only borrow 3.5 times your wage. So someone on, say, 30K, which is in or around average, can only get up to 90K. The average house price in Dublin now is probably close to 400K. It's not even worth trying for most of us. You could move down the country for slightly cheaper housing, but on top of that, virtually all the jobs are in Dublin. So you'd end up commuting, which would take all your time and money away. I'm in the UK, got a 10% deposit for a place, then was denied a mortgage because I'm self-employed. Now, I've been renting for 12 years, never been in debt. The freaking repayments were less than my rent. Didn't matter. Denied. I was expecting to rent out a room as well to help, but it didn't matter. I still have a deposit just sitting in my bank. Years later, doing nothing because I'm too much of a risk all these years later and can't get one. Then there's my friend who earns less than me who works for the NHS, who only needs a 5% deposit and will be able to have their own place in a year or so. I will have to just keep renting. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.